Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of a tutorial slash a little bit of a news thing, because we're going to be talking about what we think of the economic changes in 1.2. At 1.2, the live patch drops on March 13th. Currently, you can play it through the public beta, which is what we've been doing for the past few weeks. You just go into your Steam, you right-click on Victoria 3, you go into Properties, and then you go on Betas, and this is how you access it. And I just wanted to discuss all the economic things. The biggest one being changed, or the biggest thing changes, has to do with the investment pool. So now the investment pool, the way you get access to it is it gives you a private construction queue, and the private construction queue, it will build based off of what is the most profitable, which changes a lot of things, and it'll just automatically build stuff. Now, if we unpaused, I believe it would just start cranking through and adding a whole bunch of stuff here, because this was a kind of an earlier save, so it removed everything from the constructions queue, but you see it just add a bunch of stuff automatically, and it's just a bunch of stuff that's going to be relatively profitable. Now, we'll zoom in. That's a lot of icons. That's going to cause lag. Now, this has been pretty nice. Overall, from a play perspective, I like the automated pool because they will handle infrastructure for you, so you feel a lot less like you're playing whack-a-mole. But from a game balance perspective, it kind of forces your economy in a particular way, in several ways. First of all, you don't get to choose where stuff gets constructed, so stuff will get constructed in unincorporated territory quite a lot. So I'm just selecting an unincorporated province. Let's just select here. We have not intentionally built these arts academies here, but they just decided to build arts academies here because they're very profitable here. The automated or the private construction queue will choose to build them, and the reason they're profitable is because the labor is really cheap here. Normally, what I think before you would want to do on patch 1.1.2 or 1.1 whatever, is you would just want to build tall, specifically in incorporated states, because this will cause a lot more people to come there, a lot more people to work there, and they pay the taxes. Now, you are going to have a harder time getting taxes because all these unincorporated states, I don't think any of these are incorporated for us here, will start building a lot of manufacturing, so they'll force more people to settle there, or it'll encourage more people to settle there or not leave. And so this has a pretty dynamic impact, but it also makes sense from a gameplay perspective because the capitalists don't care about some sort of meta level consideration of how you're trying to balance your economy and trying to build stuff at home, but instead they just want the absolute most profitable building they can, in which case, building it where the labor's cheap is good. Now, this will be, this is also kind of bad, or not bad, but it's if we take a look at the throughput bonus, there's economies of scale. So generally, you just want to build buildings up to level 51 and get the max economies of scale throughput bonus. And the automated construction queue makes this more difficult to do. And so there are significant disadvantages to the automated queue. It does look like they care a little bit about economies of scale, or will be somewhat considerate of it. You'll see maybe 1 to 2 industries start to build up higher instead of just a smattering of a bunch of random ones. For example, this arts academy has built up higher and higher and higher, and so it's getting a 6% throughput bonus from economies of scale. Both of these have built up quite a bit. This glass is just mono glass, and this is all automated queue. And so this is a bit interesting. I think it's good. I think it does change the way you kind of look at expansion or look at a few things, namely that it makes European powers a little bit stronger. We're just talking about incorporated versus unincorporated, because European powers can incorporate New World places in just 5 years because they share historical background. So, for example, all of this for us was just a 5-year incorporation. These are incorporated. You see how we've brought this up to level 51 to get the max economies of scale throughput bonus from 50%. And so this sort of thing. Also, if you're trying to build an industrial economy specifically with the automated investment pool, it has some negative effects because you cannot control that it's going to start to build agrarian goods, and that these goods are owned by landowners. So, for example, as the grain gets expensive in your market, you'll get automated construction. Let's show the private construction for these sorts of stuff. So, for example, tobacco plantations, these are being automatically produced, and the tobacco plantations, while we have them on publicly traded, when they're privately owned, they're mostly aristocrats. They're still mostly aristocrats with publicly traded. And so it makes it a little bit harder to force, industrialization and to like stamp out landowner clout, because you will still build these buildings when they are really profitable. And when you're building only industry, generally the plantations and such will be extremely profitable, which makes it so that trade is now more important for, kind of massaging your economy to go a particular way, and importing stuff like grain or tobacco or fabric, all these sorts of things, starts to get a little bit better, I think, or is more important, more critical for developing your economy in a particular way, so that, because you don't have direct control over the private construction queue, right? And so what you have to use is you have to use indirect means to influence them. I'm hoping that they release something to do with like regulation or something like this that allows you to like tailor do stuff in a particular way, but this is the state of affairs. Now let's talk about the economic systems themselves and how they've changed and which ones we think are better and this sort of stuff in 1.2 in particular. Okay, traditionalism still sucks. Currently, now you're constantly getting investment pool, but what your economic system does is it affects the efficiency. And you notice minus 50% on capitalist investment pool contribution efficiency. It doesn't kneecap the aristocrats as early or as much early on. So you will notice traditionalism is actually a little bit better, but you will also notice this plus 25% private construction queue allocation. So all the economic systems give you a control of a differing amount of the construction that you can do, which has been a very interesting change. You'll notice interventionalism will give 50% and no modifiers. So interventionalism gives you a balance of, increased investment pool contribution efficiency and flexibility. You can subsidize everything. And so I think interventionalism went up quite a bit. In patch 1.1, Laissez-Faire was just far and away the best, and now I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore, but I do think it is the best, with some asterisks and things to talk about. But let's just go through it. Interventionalism is now vanilla basic. You want to still get off traditionalism as quickly as possible, but it is stronger, and it does give you the most control out of any except for command economy, because it gives you plus 25%, or 75% of it will be controlled by the government. But long term, with the automated pool, like, you start to not care as much that is building random stuff, and it becomes less important. So I think interventionalism early game is important, while your main goal is to ramp up construction as much as possible. But once you start producing a lot of consumer goods, you really don't care too much that the automated construction queue is building a bunch of random stuff, because that random stuff is going to be extremely popular. Now, you might care that it's in unincorporated states, and so incorporating states in general just becomes a lot stronger, because you can't just avoid building manufacturing in states. And so this changes how you want to expand a little bit and these sorts of things, in a kind of indirect way, which is interesting. Also, I think there's a bit more realism. Hopefully there's eventually there's ways to add like regulations and stuff like this and more laws, so like you could be like, oh, we don't build arms industries overseas, or like this sort of thing. Agrarianism, I had a lot of hopes for this. I messed around with it a little bit. Agrarianism still kind of sucks. So you get more aristocrat investment pool contribution efficiency, but you lose capitalist investment pool contribution efficiency. The capitalists still give way more money than the aristocrats, and so going agrarianism, you will get a much smaller investment pool contribution. If we take a look here, you can look at your investment pool and you're going to get a much smaller investment pool contribution. We're going to talk about this number later, but for now, let's keep going into it. Now, let's see. So I still think Laissez-Faire is the best, but I think it is not good very early on, and it is perhaps not good for unrecognized states. I think the minus loan interest rate is still a really strong modifier, and if you're a recognized state if you're a recognized country and you want to deficit spend, I think Laissez-Faire is really good. If you're not going to deficit spend, I think Laissez-Faire is probably a little bit better than interventionalism, but not way better. Disallowing the downsizing of non-government buildings to my mind, or they might have changed this, but I have experienced there's the Metropolitan Railway event, which is actually crippling if you're building really, really tall in one province and that province is the capital. Not being able to downside the railroads when it gets plus 100% throughput is extremely painful. Not being able to downsize stuff is a disadvantage, especially in rural areas where you want to boost the economies of scale. So you want to like delete a few so you can get increased economies of scale in rural areas for your arable land goods. This is a bit annoying. I wish that, you could have the control to just say, look, we can only build one good in this province. You can expand it as much as you like, but once the first one's in, it's whatever. And what I mean by this here, let me explain. Like, let's say we have this province here, South Cameroon, or this one here. If we take a look at all the agriculture, it's been built up, and it's been built up largely through the automated queue, and it's a bunch of different stuff. Now, if you look at the Dice Plantation, it is a throughput bonus of 26% from economies of scale, and so you would rather just have all of these be die plantations, right? And then you go to a different one, and then all of them are tea, for example, would be ideal. That way you're maximizing throughput from economies of scale. The AI, to some extent, will do this because it'll see the throughput, and it'll see that it'll be more profitable. But you get a large amount of, non-specialized areas, which hurts efficiency somewhat. And not being able to downsize it once you hit super late game is bad for Laissez-Faire. Also, I guess we'll talk about this now. There's now a modifier that the larger your economy gets, the less you get from your investment pool contribution, so that eventually investment pool, as a mechanic, falls off considerably, in terms of how useful it is, which is interesting from a gameplay perspective because throughout the early game and the mid game, you're going to rely heavily on investment pool, but then it starts getting not so good early on. And so this makes Laissez-Faire extremely strong early. Let's talk about it. Laissez-Faire is extremely strong in the early to mid game when the investment pool contribution is huge, but as you start to get a larger and larger negative modifier because your GDP gets so big, it starts becoming not as good, and not being able to delete stuff is kind of annoying. Being only in control of 25% of the construction is annoying, and when you stop wanting to deficit spend, you lose out on this. And so I think that late game or super late game Laissez-Faire is probably not as good as interventionalism. So you have this weird sort of oscillation where you want to go interventionalism early to ramp up construction, and then when you start like wanting to focus more on consumer goods, then Laissez-Faire is better, and then once the investment pool starts not being as good, then interventionalism becomes better again because you just have more control and flexibility. This is kind of leaving out cooperative ownership and command economy for reasons we'll talk about a little bit later. I think cooperative ownership is decent. It gives you control over a lot of, a large percentage of your pool. You'll see it has plus 35% private construction allocation, right? And you can subsidize all. Oh, this is change. You did not used to be able to subsidize all buildings, but it gives plus 35% construction allocation. And so this means you're in control of 65%. Earlier on, I think at 1.2.1, you couldn't subsidize anything, which was actually really annoying with cooperative ownership because you couldn't subsidize railroads for infrastructure. But the railroads in general would be more profitable because Council Republic is good. Council Republic's also gotten a huge nerf. We're going to talk about that. I have not tried command economy, but they do have... they do suffer from a negative modifier for command economy efficiency, but all the buildings are owned by the government itself. You can subsidize all. I think you have to subsidize all. It disables the investment pool, and so the ownership goes directly to you, the player. I still have to play around with this a little bit, so I can't really report on it very definitively. I think it might be good, but the problem with command economy and cooperative ownership and all this is the Council Republic nerfs. Now, Council Republic was really, really strong in 1.1. Now, unless you are just conquering everyone and you're going full bad boy mode, which is a fair enough strategy, I generally underuse that strategy relative to how strong it is because I think that the playstyle is less fun, and I am hoping that Victoria 3, the AI, gets strong enough, or there are game mechanics to prevent you from going like full evil and just like crushing the entire world, to allow for a little bit more of a nuanced and stable gameplay. But, Council Republic gives you a minus 150 malice to getting people to join your customs union. And this is huge, because it basically means you can't expand your customs union. Also, people don't want to trade with you. You'll get embargoed a lot more, which all this makes sense. But it makes it so Council Republic has a very, very significant negative trade-off, because you want to pull people into your customs union so you can sap off their pops, these sorts of stuff. It also, like, it ruins your ability to trade with a lot of people, and so you have to be a lot more self-centered or self-centric, and so this makes the cooperative ownership and command economy just can't be evaluated in a vacuum, because in order to get these systems, people will no longer want to trade with you, and you have to give up your ability to, like, customs union into protectorate as a means of integrating countries. And so, you know, where you go, you bring them in this customs union, and then you protectorate them, and then you make them a subject later by declaring war on them. If you notice here, we're going to talk about, I guess we could talk about this now. They've changed a lot of the interactions as well with major powers and regional major powers. And the biggest one is now regional, unrecognized major powers can be incorporated in the customs union, which changes the meta pretty significantly, I think, because getting Great Qing in your customs union is a great way to, once you do that, your population's basically handled, right? Because people will migrate to Great Qing, or from Great Qing once you have multiculturalism. It'll really pop off. There's an enormous amount of population in Great Qing. You notice we have Spain here, and we've just been cranking off in terms of pop. Just very, very, very strong. And so this changes a lot of things in terms of, like, how you're going to view expansion. Also, you can no longer directly puppet major powers. You cannot just declare war to puppet them. So, for example, if we go into here and we see who's the strongest power, looks like Russia and Italy are really strong. We cannot... Oh, well, we can't target them with a play, but, for example, we cannot vassalize them, or we cannot puppet them. This is saying we can. Okay, well then that's... Color me confused, because I have had the experience that you cannot puppet people. Okay, here we go. Russia cannot become a puppet type subject due to their rank being major power. So before, if you're a GP, a great power, you used to be able to puppet major powers, and now you cannot. And so this kind of changes, you know, expansion a little bit. This is less of an economic thing, but it becomes an economic thing when we're talking about customs union into protectorate, because it appears that you can customs union a major power and then protectorate them, and then once they are protectorate, then it seems like you can vassalize them. And so this makes this sort of small ball, low infamy economic expansion a little bit better, which is, I think, a feature that they were going for. Yeah. Just quickly noting on Council Republic, one of the best features of Council Republic is, like, your ability to siphon off population from other people, and it makes it harder to suck off pops because there's no one to suck off, because you can't get people into the customs union, which is normally how you kind of get these populations. If you notice, we have Great Qing in the customs union here, in Iberia, and this is... we're siphoning off pops from them. If they weren't in the market, we wouldn't be able to do that. And the minus 150 balance makes it really hard to bring them into the market. And so, I still think Council Republic is still quite strong, but you have to already have a large percentage of trade has to have become trivial or not particularly useful for Council Republic to be good, I think. Because people will embargo you, they won't want to trade with you and this sort of stuff. When you become really, really, really huge, and you are the world's market, then trade becomes less relevant, especially if you have a bunch of these powers. Like, if Great Qing was a protectorate, Brazil was a protectorate, Mexico was a protectorate, then going Council Republic would make a lot of sense here. The next thing we're going to talk about is arable land changes. This is pretty significant. They instituted a... before, you used to have, like, this province in Jiangxi used to have 1,500 arable land potential. Now it has, like, 600. And the reason, or the way that they changed it was they added subsistence rice paddies, which can employ... like 10,000 instead of 5,000. I forget exactly how it works. It's something like this, but it basically cut the, or doubles the amount that they can employ. So they cut the arable land for every place that uses rice, basically, in half, which is a significant nerf to, you know, all of Southeast Asia and China and India, because now it has way less arable land, which is significant because each unit of arable land increases the max pop before you start suffering the malus for migration attraction by 100,000. So you can no longer build these states up anywhere near as high because they cannot attract as many migrants at the highest level. For example, in Castile here, you'll see that we have, we are not currently getting a negative modifier for being overpopulated, but eventually you will get a negative modifier for being overpopulated. It's based on your total arable land, and so you have much less potential to just slap down a encourage manufacturing edict in Jiangxi and just crank just the single province up to like infinity and be able to support an enormous population. It's been cut in half, roughly speaking. Also, you can only get like half of the cotton plantations and this sort of stuff. And also, when you make a tea plantation, it fires all the people who are currently employed in the subsistence farms. So you'll create enormous unemployment relative to how it is in 1.1 whenever you build something in the arable land. So that's kind of thing one. Huge arable land in nerf in Asia, or the nerf was tremendous in Asia. The second thing is they made it so a ton of states in the New World have an enormous arable land potential, way more than they used to. So Texas is a good example. It's now top 3 or top 5, something like this, in terms of total arable land. And so this makes it so Texas can support an enormous population kind of later on. And so it makes these states all more valuable. And also, when you look at migration attraction, there should be, let's see. Well, the New York modifier applies to all the states. That's nuts. I was not even aware of that. That's crazy. But unused arable land modifier will give like a ton to Texas, but also they will receive a bonus for being underpopulated for longer. Texas is no longer underpopulated, which makes the population explode in the United States more so than it did before. It's same for Argentina, which we've annexed, and Chile. Just all of the New World generally has more arable land. Their populations will grow more significantly throughout the game as they siphon off pops through like mass migration events and these sorts of things because of the increased arable land. So a lot of these provinces are way better dominioning or puppeting, these countries really early on can be really powerful because they start out with low populations. Their population will increase by a ton, and then you can annex some of these sorts of stuff. But the arable land changes are rather substantive, significantly nerfing this region. It's still really strong to just take Chinese provinces because you take their population of 20 million and you can integrate it, but it's now a lot harder to integrate them because let's talk about the multiculturalism nerf. So multiculturalism is still far and away the best citizenship law. In this run in particular with Iberia, we were experimenting with cultural exclusion to try and assimilate pops, to try and this strategy is not working. We wanted to try and assimilate pops and convert them to Spanish, because if we take a look at the culture map mode here, we were hoping that we could try and convert some of these to Spanish through like various means. That way the integration would only take 2 years or 5 years or this sort of thing. And so we are trying to, adopt a strategy where we can assimilate a lot more strongly, but this hasn't been effective. Multiculturalism is still far and away the best. And so, but multiculturalism got a pretty significant nerf in 2 ways. First of all, it is no longer tied in the tech tree. It is no longer tied to egalitarianism. It is instead tied to human rights. Human rights allows multiculturalism. So it went from being a tier 2 tech to a tier 3 tech. Also, okay, just to be clear why this is economics, it is now a lot harder to get really, really cheap labor in your market because of multiculturalism, because you are now have way more of a speed bump in terms of getting multiculturalism to get a bunch of migration to make labor cheap for this sort of thing. Significantly more difficult. But back to what we were talking about, the tech is harder to get, and also it is harder to pass, and it is real hard to pass because the Intelligentsia, if we take a click on them, we have moderate here, which is good. They no longer support, I think it's liberal, let's talk about it. They no longer support multiculturalism. In fact, they oppose multiculturalism, which means the vanilla liberal will not allow you to pass multiculturalism. In fact, no interest group at its base level is interested in multiculturalism, which is far and away, like, it's not even close on citizenship. Multiculturalism is just the best. And so, this makes passing multiculturalism hard. The way you do it is there's an event. I think you need to be off of monarchy. You need to have like one of the republics, one of the republics, and then also pass census suffrage or universal suffrage, and it procs this event. I forget what the event's called. It gives you a radical. So now I think the meta tactic for doing this and to try and get multiculturalism will be waiting to do both a republic and census/universal suffrage until after you've researched human rights. And then once you do that, then you switch. You proc the events, you get the radical, and you immediately switch to trying to pass multiculturalism, and you just hope you get lucky, and you hope your radical doesn't die. Because a person with the radical, I'm not talking about radicalism, I'm talking about radical. Let's see. Ooh, this guy's market liberal, so we're going to talk about that next. A person with the ideology or an interest group ideology of a radical will support multiculturalism. I think this is the only one. I think there's a communist one, or an anarchy might support multiculturalism, an anarchist. If I'm not mistaken, the Vanguardist does not. We have a Vanguardist right now. They do not support multiculturalism. But I think that these are the only two ideology groups that will support multiculturalism, and you're going to need it. But the second thing I wanted to talk about was the buff to the market liberal ideology, because previously the market liberal did not endorse abolishing serfdom. And this is like, okay, well, why is this a big deal for economics? This seems like a rather small thing. Well, the Corn Laws event chain is super overtuned and really strong at the beginning of the game, because what it does is allows you to get a market liberal landowner. And so if you have a landowner that supports serfdom abolished, free trade, and laissez-faire / interventionalism, man oh man is it easy to make all the economic reforms at the start of the game. You provoke the Corn Laws by starting to export grain, and I think you also need the landowners inside the government, easy enough. And then you just get this market liberal guy who will help you abolish serfdom, enact laissez-faire, and also free trade. Before, it used to be the case that in laws you would kind of have to wait until you passed abolish serfdom, and then you would provoke the Corn Laws event, get your market liberal, and then switch to interventionalism / laissez-faire. Well, before you just switch to laissez-faire. And then also free trade, this sort of stuff. Now you just, at the very start of the game, can basically just pop off and abolish serfdom, because the market liberal now opposes serfdom, and you just provoke the Corn Laws with almost everyone. The one thing to consider, or one thing to keep in mind, is he doesn't help you get off of Isolationist. So if you're playing an Isolationist start, like Japan or Sokoto or something like this, Siam is another Isolationist, I think all the Ethiopian countries are Isolationist, you will just need to get off of Isolationism first, which is easy enough. Mercantilism is generally easy to do at the beginning of the game, and then you get your market liberal boyo, and then you pass very, very quickly serfdom abolished, interventionalism probably early on, but laissez-faire later on, and then you pass, that's not it. My brain. This is your brain on Victoria 3. Then you pass free trade afterwards. So you just go isolationism, mercantilism, and then you switch everything. And so this is pretty substantive. It makes it very, very easy to just get the best economic laws with the Corn Laws event chain, now that they will help you abolish serfdom. I'm not very much a fan of the event chain. I think allowing you to get a landowner market liberal is just stupid. I think that it's super overtuned. I think that they should have some sort of other, I don't know why this event chain's in the game. It makes it decreases a lot of the dynamism and interesting parts of, playing as someone who is a little bit backward and struggling to get out from under the landowners. This just makes it extremely easy. And yeah. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is the economy size malice for the investment pool contribution, because this is huge. Let's go in here. and come in here, and you will see all investments are multiplied by 0.31 due to the Iberian gross domestic product of 1.95 billion. Now, I believe, I'm not sure if this gets refunded to the pops or the exact measure, how much in terms of, if they're multiplied by 0.31, does this mean that the pops or the capitalists are keeping 0.69? Nice. I don't know exactly how that works, but what it means is that as you get later and later in the game and you get a bigger and bigger economy, investment pool starts to not be very useful, which changes a few things. First of all, it means that laissez-faire is just not always better. It's just better while the investment pool is huge. Or while it's a huge deal and not suffering a huge malice. After that, it kind of starts getting bad, especially when you want to start downsizing and upsizing, especially in areas that produce opium or something like this, where it's hard for you to get the good. And it gives you less control over your stuff. Loans. Deficit spending becomes worse as this modifier gets bigger and bigger, this malice here. And so this is pretty significant. It also makes some of the later tax systems a lot better. Before, it used to be the case that passing graduated taxation would almost never get you more money unless you had an extremely stratified economy. And now this is not as much the case. And also, getting more money from taxes becomes better because one of the reasons for like staying on per capita taxation or not going to graduated taxation is it would increase the investment pool contribution. But now, since the investment pool contribution is being modified by a negative modifier that is pretty substantive as your economy gets large, this makes it so that trying to juice up the industrialists and make them super rich gets worse and worse as the game goes on and as your economy gets bigger. And so what this means is that the meta in terms of when you start transitioning into a late game is high taxes, and starting to move away from the industrialists and away from investment pool contribution. It starts not being as big a factor. Now, our investment pool transfer is still huge. If we filled out this queue, it's still quite large. 1 million a tick is a good amount. If we take a look at the size of our economy, our national revenue is around 7 million, but it would be 3 million if it were not modified by this negative modifier, so it's quite substantive, and it makes the investment pool contribution sort of stuff considerations, it makes it so that investment pool is a lot worse, which brings us back to the nerfed Council Republic. Because Council Republic, the big downside, or one of the big downsides, at least in 1.1 of Council Republic, is that you lose out on the investment pool. Well, when the investment pool starts to suck, then Council Republic gets a lot better. So a Council Republic is an interesting one in that eventually, like, as you start getting really, really big and controlling a large percentage of the world market, Council Republic starts to get good in that sense, like good in the vacuum, but the problem is you can't pull people into your market with Council Republic. So it creates, well, what's the most effective, like, strategy? And it might just be trying to protectorate as many people as possible, very, very aggressively, get your market huge, then swap to Council Republic. Since they are protectorates, they can't leave your market, so they're stuck in. And because your economy is so large and you're not getting much from the investment pool, you don't lose out and you don't suffer the negatives, and you get the positive of the workers' cooperative. And so, it's we've arrived at sort of a system where, or a metagame where there's shifting. Instead of like just passing the laws you like and just sitting on them, there's now a bit of shifting in terms of what's good. Like early on, you want interventionalism. That way you can focus on expanding construction as much as possible while still benefiting quite a bit from the investment pool. And then when you turn a corner and start wanting to produce consumer goods, laissez-faire becomes best. But laissez-faire eventually starts to, kind of toned down, and then switching back to interventionalism becomes good as long as you're still pulling people into the market. But once you already control an enormous percentage of the market, then you want to switch to Council Republic and cooperative ownership / command economy. Now, again, I do not know exactly the feel of command economy because they suffer from a negative efficiency modifier in terms of the profits going. Now they've made it so the government properly owns everything, and so you get the profits of all your buildings, but the profits are affected by a negative malice. To my understanding, that is similar to this. As your economy gets bigger, you get a bigger and bigger malice. So my guess is that once you're big enough that you don't want the investment pool from like the capitalists, you probably won't want the investment, or you probably won't really like command economy that well, and so cooperative ownership in a super late game environment is probably the best one. But it's this interesting interventionalism, laissez-faire interventionalism, cooperative ownership is a kind of interesting like path to be taking, because you're wanting to switch back and forth between laws based on various things. I still think agrarianism sucks. Traditionalism definitely sucks. Not 100% sure on command economy. But all these differences are pretty interesting. Also, being able to making it harder to get multiculturalism is going to make it makes it significantly harder to get cheap labor. Also, it just makes I think it's very important to emphasize that there is a way to force yourself to get radical in that one event chain, and it's going to make it so that staying on monarchy is going to be really bad, or staying on monarchy and off of like census suffrage, universal suffrage is going to be extremely bad, because getting that radical so you can pass a multiculturalism is going to be so big. That way you can get the migrants and expand your population and this sort of thing. But this has kind of been, my thoughts on some of the economic changes in patch 1.2. We'll just go through it really quick. First, the automated investment pool kind of siphons away control from you. This is a nice quality of life change, because when you only have to control half of the construction, now it makes, playing at... Before, construction would be hard to manage once you started getting around 4K. Now it gets hard like once you're kind of around 8K. The exception being if you have like no resources to expand, your investment pool will not... operate at 50% or 75%, depending on which law had the private stuff. It just won't produce enough buildings, because it's like, hey, these aren't profitable enough once you start running out of arable land. But other than that, it does offload a lot of the cognitive load for you as the player. It also expands specifically infrastructure, which is incredibly nice. So quality of life, it's nice. But other than quality of life, from a gameplay mechanic perspective, you do have unincorporated states building a lot of this stuff, and which makes it so that adopting a strategy of just incorporating some states and leaving a lot unincorporated to get the bonus from colonial exploitation from a 10% throughput is a lot weaker, because now you want to tax these pops, and so you want to aggressively incorporate a bit more. But the problem is this is a 20-year incorporation, so this sort of thing, in terms of the investment pool, it's 20 years right here, see? And so the automated construction does have several effects. I hope that they add some sort of regulation that you can do this sort of stuff. But yeah, the automated pool is a bit interesting. Also, as it relates to, economic systems, the modifiers for the investment pool contribution efficiency are a huge factor. I think laissez-faire is the best system overall, but it's going to involve switching to laissez-faire and then back to interventionalism / cooperative ownership and all this. And this dynamism is tremendously interesting in 1.2. You can play around with the various laws. Unfortunately, agrarianism just still sucks, because the base, it's giving plus 50% aristocrats investment pool contribution efficiency, but it's modifying a value that's already really weak. And then you also can't build incredibly tall with the agriculture. The agriculture, you can't build infinitely tall. You can only build, the manufacturer is infinitely tall, and so it remains pretty bad, agrarianism, although it is better than it was before. Council Republic has now gotten a nerf, in my mind. It used to just be best, but it's gotten a nerf / buff. Super late game, it's got a bit of a buff, in that the investment pool starts to suck, and this was one of the big downsides of Council Republic previously. But it is now impossible to pull anyone into your customs union when you have Council Republic, although it is easier to raw dog protectorate people, because you used to suffer a malice. Here, let's do this. You used to suffer a malice from differing ideologies, and you no longer suffer that malice. And so it is significantly easier to just protectorate people, even if they're not in the customs union. And so this is something you can still do when you go Council Republic. But overall, not being able to pull people into your market is a significant nerf. It also makes sense. The name of the modifier is like, we have inconsistent economic systems, which I think is I think it's great. I just don't know if it should be 150. But the minus 150 is it's just a way of saying you can't do it, right? Because we have incompatible economic systems. So I guess that's what they wanted to do. I don't know why they chose 150. It's an impossible modifier to overcome, I believe, mathematically speaking. Okay. They also changed how you can puppet and protectorate people, which changes how you can get people into the market. Very, very, very significantly, unrecognized major powers. You can now pull them into your customs union. You can make them a protectorate. If you notice, Great Qing is in our market. So, in terms of best practice, getting Great Qing into your market is now going to be like a huge. If you can do it, it's just absolutely huge because you can siphon off a lot of pops as long as you're multicultural, which is harder to do. There was also arable land changes, which have nerfed all of the places that now have rice paddies because they can employ twice as many pops, which basically means, for the most part, the amount of arable land in all of the Asian territories over here is halved. And then they also buffed most of the New World provinces by giving them more arable land. And so the value of provinces has changed quite a bit. It used to be you would just take Chinese provinces for huge arable land and pop. Now you're taking them for rather large arable land and pop. It's still probably a really strong strategy, but it's significantly weakened. Also, there has been a buff to the market liberal, The market liberal ideology for your interest groups, in that they can now abolish serfdom, which makes the Corn Laws event chain even stronger. You proc this event by encouraging exports on your grain while you have the landowners in government, and it just lets you pass all the good economic laws for free. And so you used to have to try and pass serfdom before you provoked this event chain, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to go interventionalism / Laissez-Faire. Now these guys will just let you abolish serfdom, which is... It makes the event, in my mind, I really don't like the event. I think it's too strong. I'm still doing the event anyways, because I think it's the proper way to play, and it's like not even close. But I would love to see the event nerfed, or market liberal this changed in terms of abolishing serfdom. I think they should abolish serfdom. I think you just shouldn't be able to get a market liberal from the Corn Laws event chain. But okay. There was also a significant multiculturalism nerf in that... the Intelligentsia no longer base supports it, which means you have to go for... I think Anarchist also supports it, but for the most part, you have to try and go for someone with the radical ideology on their interest group. There's an event that you can do to provoke it. I don't remember exactly what the event's called, but I believe you need to be on a republic / also pass census suffrage or universal suffrage, and this will give you a person who's a radical, and then you can enact multiculturalism. But other than that, multiculturalism is still just the best because it affects migration in such a huge way. Even if you own the land. So, for example, these guys are really not migrating a whole lot, despite the fact that they're dying, because we don't have multiculturalism anymore. When we turned on multiculturalism, they used to migrate a way, way larger amount, and now they're not really migrating as much. Even though the SOL here is just absolutely terrible. It's 7.8 for the lower rung pops, because there's so many unemployed, because we built up out of the subsistence farms. We built a whole bunch of these, which fired all the pops, right? And so now they're unemployed. And so this is another thing regarding arable land changes. You cannot build up too much agriculture if you're in like Great Qing. And so they used to be an excellent choice for arable land, but you'll get too many unemployed pops and you'll just get wrecked. So there's multiculturalism nerf. And then there's the economy size malice, which I think is fantastic, which affects the investment pool / reinvestment that you get from a command economy. And this makes laissez-faire late game much, much, much worse. And it makes... let's get it. It makes cooperative ownership, where the biggest downside of cooperative ownership is you're really not getting a lot of investment pool. It makes cooperative ownership significantly better. Well, the biggest downside is now that you can't pull people into your customs union, but means super late game, as you start to acquire pretty significant malice, interventionalism and cooperative ownership start to look a lot better. And so I just think I like this change, but it makes the game more dynamic. You will not notice this. It's not that or it's kind of noticeable because you don't just absolutely pop off when you get super far ahead of the AI in terms of the economy. So it's actually even harder to pull ahead of the AI a little bit. It's still super easy, but this change is quite nice. I like it quite a bit, but it's substantive as far as the economics go. And these are my thoughts on the economic changes in 1.2. If you think I missed something, feel free to put it in the comments and I'll give my opinion on it. I think that these are probably the most substantive changes that relate directly to economics. I think there's still like a lot of big changes like in warfare and stuff like this, but I do think that this is kind of what I want to say about the economics of it. I generally like these changes. I don't like the buff to market liberal. The multiculturalism nerf, I think it should be nerfed in a different way. I think that the law is just still way too strong. There's just no situation where you just want to go any of these other ones. Multiculturalism is just like, it just feels strictly better. Even no migration controls, which is like almost a strictly better law. Migration controls is actually nice because if you don't discriminate against anyone, then you get like +1 approval from migration controls or like this sort of thing. It's like, but it's like, that's also like, this is kind of not a very nuancedly grained thing. But yeah, I just think that multiculturalism is too strong, and it should be nerfed in a different way other than just making it harder to enact. Like, it should have more substantive downsides. In the future, I'm hoping for more laws to allow you to regulate what the automated queue and what the government queue can build. Something like this, which allows you to, exercise more indirect control. Specifically, it just drives my brain absolutely crazy that it's just going to build a bunch of different goods now in these areas, and I can't micromanagement the throughput bonus from economies of scale. I'm like, but this is kind of whatever. Anyways, I've gone on long enough. Again, if you think I missed something, feel free to let me know. And March 13th, the patch officially drops. Again, if you want to play it now, you can go into the betas. You can opt into the beta. Just right-click on the game in Steam, and then click Properties, and then click Betas, and it should be in there. And have a good one. Boo-boo. Bye-bye.